Have you ever wondered why a man can walk away from almost anything, except the quiet, undefinable mystery of a woman who never tries to be understood? In every era, across every culture, there are women whose energy does not shout or plead, but pulls. Women whose presence does not demand attention, yet becomes the place where a man's unconscious begins to unravel itself. And it happens long before he realizes he is no longer responding to you from the surface of his ego, but from something far older, far deeper, far more instinctual. It begins subtly, almost imperceptibly. A man senses something in you that does not bend, does not cling, does not scramble for reassurance. Your silence does not punish, yet it exposes the noise in his own mind. Your stillness does not manipulate, yet it unsettles him more than confrontation ever could. This is where spiritual addiction begins, not with seduction, but with the echo of his own shadow reflected back through your quiet confidence. Jung wrote that no human relationship is merely between two individuals. It is also a meeting between two unconscious worlds. And when a woman carries mystery with grace, she awakens dormant archetypes within a man that he can neither name nor ignore. He becomes drawn to you in the same way a traveler is drawn to a place he has only seen in dreams. Something in your presence feels like a memory he cannot trace. Something in your distance feels like a truth he cannot touch. And that is the first sign of spiritual addiction, an inexplicable pull that has nothing to do with physical beauty or romantic fantasy. It is the pull of the psyche searching for completion, of the masculine seeking the feminine not to possess it, but to understand itself through it. Yet he cannot articulate this. He will say he is intrigued, captivated, confused. But the reality is simpler and more dangerous. Your mystery awakens the parts of him that he abandoned long ago. As days pass, he begins to respond to subtleties he once ignored in other women. The way your attention is precise, not scattered. The way your emotional boundaries are firm, not defensive. The way you listen not to agree or argue, but to reveal what is left unspoken. He feels exposed by this. Not attacked, exposed. And men who are unaccustomed to meeting a woman who does not perform for validation often become intoxicated by the challenge. Your refusal to rush into intimacy forces his ego into a tension it cannot easily soothe. It is the same tension Seneca wrote of when he warned that the human mind fears what it cannot categorize. He begins to anticipate you, to think of your reactions before you give them, to replay your silence more than your words. He notices how your detachment does not come from coldness but from self-possession. You do not fold under pressure. You do not melt into flattery. You do not negotiate your standards. And something in him, something ancient and half-forgotten, begins to rise. Jung called this the anima, the inner feminine that every man carries, usually untouched, often avoided. But in your presence, this inner feminine is stirred awake, not romantically, archetypally. And when a man's anima awakens, he no longer sees a woman as merely a partner. He sees her as an unfinished map of his own psyche. He starts to mirror you without realizing it, seeking stillness because you embody it, reflecting more because you provoke thought instead of reaction, becoming more attentive, not because you demand it, but because your mystery makes him question the shallowness of his past choices. Some men resist this shift, fearing the vulnerability it requires. Others lean into it, sensing that something important is happening inside them, even if they cannot describe what it is. But all of them, in one form or another, feel the same magnetic tension, the urge to decode you, paired with the fear of being changed by whatever truth he might find. And you, without performing, without dramatizing, without chasing, become the psychological mirror he cannot turn away from. He begins to sense that your mystery is not a game but a boundary, a form of sacred self-respect carved from experience, silence, and shadow work. Your energy forces him to confront the dissonance between the man he pretends to be and the man he secretly longs to become. That confrontation is addictive, not because it feels good, but because it feels real. What he feels next is a kind of restlessness, a quiet disturbance that rises when a man encounters a woman who cannot be predicted by surface logic. Her presence becomes a catalyst, drawing out his contradictions and making him aware of the fractures in his own identity. Jung wrote that the unconscious always seeks expression, and when it cannot find its voice through dreams, it seeks a living symbol. A mysterious woman often becomes that symbol, not because she intends to, but because her depth gives shape to the very emotions a man has spent years ignoring. This restlessness grows in the spaces between your words. When you do not reply immediately, he senses the difference, not an absence, but a kind of dignified distance. When you choose silence instead of explanation, he feels the weight of his own projections pressing against the quiet. Your energy does not chase, and because it does not chase, it forces his own emotional movement to surface. Many men mistake this for chemistry, passion, or destiny, but Jung would say it is the psyche recognizing its missing pieces. He begins to wonder what you are thinking in moments when you offer nothing but a calm expression. He notices the way your attention moves like water, fluid, intentional, never grasping. He feels the sharp contrast between the women he has known, who performed certainty to mask insecurity, and the way you hold ambiguity with a steadiness that unsettles him. This is where the second wave of spiritual addiction forms. You represent a psychological terrain he has never walked. You mirror his longing for depth without offering him shortcuts to reach it. There is a subtle power in this. When a woman possesses emotional gravity, a man senses it instinctively. Not because she demands to be taken seriously, but because her presence carries an ancient steadiness that refuses to be diminished for the sake of comfort. He becomes aware, sometimes painfully, of the ways he has been living on the surface, chasing validation, avoiding intimacy, clinging to illusions of control. Your mystery does not invite him into fantasy. It forces him to confront reality, especially the reality of who he has been avoiding becoming. He finds himself returning to conversations in his mind, replaying your tone, your pauses, the way you seemed unaffected by the little performances that once worked on others. It is not that you are indifferent. It is that your attention is sovereign, given with purpose rather than desperation. This sovereignty becomes the third layer of his attachment, the realization that you cannot be swayed by charm or ego. You move through the world with a sense of inner structure, guided by the lessons your shadow taught you. Shadow work leaves a woman quieter, more discerning. She no longer seeks entertainment in chaos or validation from men who cannot meet her depth. And because of this, a man feels that your mystery is not a mask but a boundary, not a game but a spiritual alignment. He senses the difference even if he cannot name it. And this awareness pulls him deeper because every attempt to categorize you fails. You become, in his psyche, both a question and a compass. Men are not accustomed to being emotionally disarmed in this way. When faced with a woman who holds herself with stillness, who does not barter affection for attention, who carries her silence like a kind of ancient knowing, the male unconscious awakens defensively at first. He may become more attentive, more reactive, more sensitive to your fluctuations. He may even attempt to mirror your mystery, though it rarely lasts. For a man, mystery borrowed is a performance, mystery lived is evolution. And you are living it, not acting it. As he grows more entangled, he begins to sense that you see beneath his persona. Jung believed that every persona, the mask we show the world, hides a deeper truth waiting to be revealed. When you look at him with calm, unhurried eyes, he feels exposed, not judged, seen. And for many men, being seen is far more destabilizing than being criticized. Criticism wounds the ego. Being seen bypasses it. This is when his attraction shifts from desire to fixation, from interest to preoccupation. Your presence begins to occupy the spaces between his plans, his conversations, his moments of solitude. You appear in the gaps, those unguarded windows when the ego is quiet and the unconscious rises. It is there, in that quiet inner chamber, that the spiritual imprint of your mystery begins to take root. A man can resist a woman's beauty, but he cannot easily resist the woman who awakens his hidden self. What deepens his attachment even further is the way your presence reveals the tension between who he is and who he could be. A mysterious woman does not demand transformation, yet her very existence evokes it. She does not lecture, push, or guide with force. Instead, she holds her center so steadily that a man feels the pull toward his own unrealized potential. This is the quiet alchemy of feminine depth. It awakens evolution without insisting on it. It summons a higher version of a man not through pressure, but through resonance. He begins sensing this shift in the smallest moments. A sudden awareness of the way he speaks, the impulsiveness of his reactions, the shallowness of his old patterns. He becomes more reflective, more self-conscious, not in a performative way, but in the way a man becomes aware of his posture in the presence of something sacred. It is not you who causes this. It is the standard your energy silently sets. A man who encounters a woman rooted in her own inner world inevitably confronts the disarray within his. Jung taught that the psyche resists expansion until it meets a symbol powerful enough to break its inertia. Your mystery becomes that symbol. This is when he becomes hyper-attuned to the emotional landscape between you. He notices the nuance of your moods, the subtle shifts in your tone, the quiet boundaries you enforce through calm withdrawal. He pays attention to these things not because he fears losing you, but because your emotional sovereignty commands respect. You do not argue your value, you embody it. And the man who once sought validation through external conquest now finds himself craving something far more elusive, alignment with the depth he senses in you. The fifth layer of spiritual addiction forms here, an almost ritualistic anticipation of your response. He begins to experience your attention as a kind of emotional currency, not because you ration it to manipulate him, but because you offer it only where authenticity exists. When your words come, they land with weight. When your silence comes, it resonates even deeper. Both states hold power because they flow from intention rather than impulse. This steadiness disrupts the chaos that once lived comfortably in him. He may try to intellectualize your effect on him, searching for explanations, telling himself it is chemistry or attachment or fascination. But beneath the rationalizations lies something more primal. The stirrings of the anima shift, the awakening of the inner feminine he has long suppressed. Your mystery does not feel like confusion. It feels like a doorway to self-awareness, to vulnerability, to depth. He approaches that doorway cautiously, instinctively sensing that stepping through it would alter him. Yet he cannot walk away from it either. He begins comparing the inner state he feels around you to the state he feels around others. The conversations that once entertained him now feel shallow. The attention that once boosted his ego now feels empty. The casual connections he used to pursue as distractions no longer soothe the restless energy rising within him. You have become the psychological tuning fork through which all other experiences are measured, and without intending to, you expose the emptiness of his former desires. This shift often brings a man to an internal crossroads. Part of him wants to retreat into familiar patterns, simple affection, predictable dynamics, surface-level intimacy. But another part, the deeper and more ancient part, feels drawn to the unpredictable terrain you represent. You are not chaos, you are complexity. You are not volatility, you are depth. But for a man who has not yet met the full truth of himself, depth can feel like danger. And so he oscillates, torn between the comfort of the known and the awakening of the unknown. It is in this oscillation that the sixth layer of spiritual attachment roots itself. The realization that his desire for you is not about possession. It is about recognition. Recognition of something within him he has long ignored. Your presence calls out the parts he kept buried under busyness, distraction, and ego-centered performances. He begins to see how much of his identity was built on reflex rather than intention. And you, simply by honoring your own inner nature, expose the dissonance between his true self and his constructed one. Some men run from this awareness. Others try to reduce you to something ordinary so they can feel in control again. But the man who stays, the man who continues to feel the pull despite his fear, is the man whose psyche has already begun its descent into the transformative depths you represent. And this descent is not romantic. It is archetypal. It is the journey from ego to essence, from persona to authenticity. Your mystery becomes the quiet gateway into this journey, not because you guide him, but because you embody the integration he seeks.